All right, the pros separate games into 3 different categories: top plays, leans, and toss-ups. These are the games that the Sharps are leaning towards for Week 15 of the NFL season. Old Man Who Bets, Geoff Sheasby, and Jared Smith of SportsGrid are here to kind of sort things out. And we start things off with a divisional matchup here with the Redskins and the Eagles. Washington, 3.5-point dog in this one. They opened up at 6. It's now moved to 3.5. Jared, how are you reading that line movement right now?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think about is short week for Philly coming off that Monday night win. An emotional spot for them. They really needed that game. They don't, I mean, obviously you need every game, but this game, it could be a little bit of a letdown spot for them. You got Dallas coming up next week, and it feels like a good spot to buy on the Redskins here, considering what we see in the line movement. I'm still getting that 3 and the hook. We're seeing all the money come in on the Eagles, but the line moving towards Washington, that concerns me if you're a bettor. Also, a road divisional spot for Carson Wentz. I don't necessarily like what I've seen from him over the last couple weeks. And who's he throwing to is my big question. They are totally devoid of weapons right now. Boston Scott is their main guy out of the backfield now. He's like the Darren Sproles lookalike from what we've seen in the past. He could be an issue for this Redskins defense, but besides that, really tough sledding for this Eagles offense.
Can they run like a 4 tight end offense if possible?
It's really tough. They were going to have to suit up backup quarterbacks at wide receiver last week. It was really tough.
Yeah. Josh McCown.
He did. I do like what I saw. I do like what I see from Boston Scott. I think he actually could be a good little sleeper for any fantasy football players out there that need to have a a late running back. Yeah, a little sprinkle, a little sleeper there.
But don't pick up Josh McCown as a receiver, is what you're saying.
I would stay away from the backup quarterbacks playing wide receiver at this stage of the season.
All right. I just wanted to know where that line was.
Yeah.
Good suggestion, though. Niners given 10.5 points to the Falcons. Geoff, do the pros believe Kyle Shanahan is going to have a game plan to beat his former team?
I think so. The Niners are obviously a pretty big line, but this Falcon team is lost. They came back hard after the bye and looked good for 2 weeks. But this Niners team has done literally everything we've asked them to. They've beaten the bad teams. They've beaten the good teams. If Jimmy G needs to go off, he will. Emmanuel Sanders has been a huge pickup for him. Of course, they have Kittle, who went absolute beast mode to win that game last week. They have a 4-headed monster at this point on their rushing attack with Breida, Mostert, Coleman, Wilson Jr. All of them do different things. All of them seem to eat at about 5 yards per carry, which is outrageous. And then their defense, second in defensive efficiency across the board. They're stopping everybody. Their strength, of course, has been in the secondary. And one of the biggest weaknesses for Atlanta, Devontae Freeman hasn't looked very good until last week. So all things considered, I just think it's going to be too much for Atlanta on a lost season. Maybe we get unlucky and get backdoored, but this is why it's a lean. I'm taking the Niners at 10.5.
The Niners smell that number 1 seed. Yeah. They can smell it because it's there. Yeah. It's theirs to lose.
And they have so many different ways of beating you. Yeah. Like you said, it's a 4-headed rushing attack. It's proving that you don't need a bell cow running back to be a successful 100%. Rushing team in the NFL. Every team
be good up front, get good offensive linemen, and scheme well.
All right. Cardinals, 3-point home dogs to the Browns. Speaking of revenge games, Steve Wilks is the defensive coordinator with the Browns. Does that play a little bit of a role in this game at all?
I don't think so. I think this game's all about, do you trust Baker Mayfield on the road? And the Browns are 0-4 ATS on the road this season.
You think anybody's talking about Steve Wilks?
They might be. I mean, I think this, I do like what I've seen from Arizona over the last few weeks. I think what we're seeing from Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray is that they should have played a preseason game together because they didn't, and they started really slow, and people kind of jumped off the bandwagon. Little by little, week by week, you're starting to see the talent on both sides of the ball because Kingsbury, he's a great mind, and, Murray can run around and do everything he can do. I've been impressed with what I've seen over the last few weeks, some progression there. They almost covered last week against Pittsburgh. That was a closer game than people thought. That punt return for a touchdown skewed the whole, game, and Arizona ended up losing by 6. They could have won that game. I'll take them again here as a home dog. I was on them last week against Pittsburgh. Much easier opponent to play the Browns than the Steelers. I think Kyler Murray does just enough, and I tell you, I like the money line here. So take the Cardinals on +3. Also sprinkle that money line as well.
Yeah, sprinkle it. Why not?
So
I think there's also a lot to be said with the Browns looking at divisional opponents versus non-divisional opponents. Sure. 2 of their best wins of the season have come against divisional opponents. Obviously, the Cardinals, not that. Nope. I agree with Jared.
Okay, another home dog here. The Chargers getting 2.5 against the Vikings. Is this a spoiler spot here for the Chargers, Geoff?
Yeah, I love the Chargers in this one. They've been lackluster all year. Of course, they have 8 losses, but looking at those losses, every single one of them has been by a touchdown or less. I think something has to give. When we look at the efficiency number here between the two teams, offensively, the Chargers have been good. They're 10th there. Minnesota is 7th. The big delta here comes on the defensive side. Minnesota, I believe, is 8th. The Chargers 22nd. So that would explain the line, right? Of course, they're underdogs. But I think what's really important here is when we look at good teams, the Chargers defense has shown up. They held the Chiefs to only 24, the Packers to 11, both of which were home games. The Chargers are home again here. And we look at mutual opponents, I also think we see a little bit more parity. Minnesota beat Denver by 4. The Chargers lost by 3 and 7. Again, 1 score. Kansas City, Minnesota lost by 3. The Chargers lost by 7 there. So when we look at that kind of motivation, I think the Chargers bring it at home. I think it's, again, a good buy low spot. I think the line is too small. I think if it was closer to 5-6, I'd be on the other side of this. But nonetheless, I think the only thing I'm really concerned about here would be maybe a Phillip Rivers pick 6 for a backdoor, but that's an outlier. I can't go off of that.
Right, and
I'm
the
taking
Chargers never find ways to lose games.
They've been great at finding ways to lose, but
okay, so that's actually
lost 8 of them.
That's actually a really good point, because the trend is that they found ways to lose games in some ridiculous ways. Is there a regression to that? Like, have they had all the bad luck they can handle for the rest of the year here, Jared? Or does that mean this is just going to be a bad luck team for the season?
There's some Chargers fans hoping for that, but I think the home road splits for LA, as you would call it, I mean, that's been the hard part for me to kind of swallow that, because they just don't play well at home. They play much better on the road. They're coming off their best game of the season, and I love fading teams after their best week. I love buying teams after their worst week. This is a rare tail to public play for me, because I'm a contrarian bettor of sorts in the NFL, but the Vikings in this spot, Adam Thielen's coming back. I just don't trust Phillip Rivers against a really good defense that needs this game. The Vikings need this game. That NFC North is a bear, no pun intended, to the worst team in the league, or the worst team in the division. But also in the playoff standings, it's tight in the NFC. There's a lot of good teams. They need to continue to stack up wins if they want any hope of making the playoffs. And I will take the Vikings in this spot and hope that Kirk Cousins does enough on the road.
That's right. If Niners slip, the Vikings are going to be right there to fill in the spot. All right, the Dolphins getting 3.5 against the Giants here. Neither one of them are having, I don't know, I guess neither one of you have this as a best bet or a lean, but Jared, you like the over on this one at 45.5?
Yeah, so I know you're thinking to yourself, well, Eli Manning, you're betting an over with Eli Manning. So against divisional opponents, both teams kind of had tight, low-scoring games last week. Dolphins lost to the Jets, Giants lost to the Eagles. I feel like the kind of, the pressure's off a little bit when you got two okay offenses. Ryan Fitzpatrick's looked okay this year, playing in his old stomping grounds at MetLife Stadium, and with Eli Manning, I'll tell you, there's a little bit of a spark there last week. We did see the ability to throw the ball down the field. These defenses have been dreadful this year. 2 of the bottom 5 defenses, DVOA rankings, which is what I look at when I'm trying to think of points. And 2 quarterbacks with nothing to lose. Okay. End of the season, it's not a playoff situation. 2 bad defense. It feels like a shootout type of scenario could be brewing here at MetLife.
Well, okay, I'll add one element to it. We should bring Lonnie Quinn in, because he says that it's going to be a blustery day on Sunday.
And we're doing, we're taping this early in the week, so check the weather and check the line movement. If it just drops on game time,
I was going to say, what would make you change your mind?
Oh, anything over 20-mile-an-hour winds.
Okay.
See, to me, and that's a good misconception. Rain and cold, not as important as wind. Wind is the most important factor for throwing the football in the NFL. The rain is not a big deal unless it's like a torrential downpour. Right. And the cold, these guys don't even really feel it out there unless it's like it was that Packers-Giants NFC Championship game when, Tom Coughlin's nose is freezing off. Then it's something to think about. But if it's windy, over 10, 15 miles an hour, that's when I would look to where the total could be affected.
All right, that's a look at their leans. Make sure you check out our other segments on their top plays and their toss-ups, and keep up with the latest lines on sportsline.com. For Geoff Sheasby and Jared Smith, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.